Hi, Mandy. Welcome. Great to have you on the show.
Hi, Nikki. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, let's dive right in. Let's share with the audience a little bit about yourself so they get to know who you are.
Okay, sure. I'm in my 19th year of being an entrepreneur. So
Wow.
back in 2002, I started my first business, which is a specialized recruitment firm purely focused on kind of emerging roles and spaces. So
Mhm.
definitely advertising, marketing, but tech, digital, and innovation. Mhm, and
Awesome.
so yeah, and so, in addition to that and running a business, I'm also a public speaker. I'm a weekly columnist with Inc. And as a couple of years ago, I'm an investor.
Awesome. Well,
Yes.
that's a lot of accomplishments, and I can't wait to find out more about your journey. So, let's start from the beginning. Tell us about your sort of foundational years. How did you discover what you wanted to do? What got you first started down that path?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because I always think it's fascinating to learn how people get started.
Hmm.
For me, my story is a little bit different. I didn't have a ton of safety net, so to speak,
Mm.
financially. I started working at a fairly young age. I was 21 when I got into business.
Mhm.
And my first role, I was working as an administrative assistant for a big global company, and I was supporting a leadership team.
Mm.
And they would give me the odd marketing project, and I got into doing like some graphic design, ad hoc work. And I thought, well, maybe I want to be a graphic designer. So I asked my sister to co-sign a loan for me to go to college part-time and focus on getting my graphic design diploma. Once I was able to do that over, I was about a year and a half of various programs, and I worked on my portfolio, and I still was working full time. So I was doing that in addition to my full time role, which was quite demanding. I thought, well, maybe it's time for me to leave this company, and so I went and interviewed at a recruitment company, an agency that specialized in placing graphic designers.
Mhm.
And the next day, I was offered a role to be in business development. And that's how I kind of fell into recruitment, because it's certainly something you don't really go to school for. You kind of just
Uh-huh.
fall into it.
So how
Um,
did you go from interviewing for one role and getting something totally different?
well, I think the individual who interviewed me he was just a really down to earth person. And I felt very comfortable with him. And I think he really was able to identify this is not somebody who's probably going to be the best graphic designer in the world. And this person is probably not going to get a lot of energy from being behind a computer all day.
Mm.
And so, how he positioned it was, how cool is it that you get to work with design and with creative agencies and people, but you're helping them with their career, and you're helping leaders hire the talent they need in order to accelerate their businesses. So it's kind of being in it without having to actually
Mhm.
be behind a computer and do the design itself.
That's incredible that he was able to see your gift and identify it in an interview and then give you the right kind of role that got you started.
Yes, yeah. No, he's great.
So
He's still a friend today. Yes.
that's amazing. So what after that? Then how did things evolve from that role to launching your own company?
Yeah, so I had really not done a ton of sales at this point in my life, given I was 21. Um, so I think maybe I was, yeah, 21, 22 years old. So I had secured the job, and my first day I was, really nervous because I think I came across very confident in my meeting, but I was really questioning my ability and understanding exactly even what the product I was selling.
Mhm.
So I went in, and I asked a ton of questions. And what I did was, we had a little kind of storage room, and I went and I cleared it out. There was a desk in there, and I put a phone. And I did that so no one else would hear me fail. because I had to actually walk the talk and develop business. And I was hung up on a ton of times. I had a lady ask me once, like, "Do you know what you're doing?" And I got so spooked, I actually hung up on her because I was so like shocked that she said that. And I called her back and I apologized and I told her, like, I got really nervous. It's my first, week on the job. And anyway, she ended up being my first client. But I failed in an epic way, but I knew I had to make it work.
Hmm.
And so I had that kind of grit, and I've had that since a young age. I
Hmm.
didn't really have a plan B. I had an apartment, I had expenses, and there wasn't anybody who could potentially bail me out. Like, this was the start of my career. I need to take it seriously. I need to be successful.
Hmm.
So over time, that success kind of happened. I was a top producer. And then I was selected to go and be part of a larger organization, a public organization, and be part of a startup within their offering. And so I did that for a couple of years. And after the time, although it was a great opportunity to learn,
Hmm.
it was the first time I had employees. Poor them. I was a very young leader, and I think I had a team of 5. Um, I didn't feel like I fit in there. Although I was successful and I had a great team and they were engaged, I philosophically just wasn't aligned. I was one of the only women in a role like mine. And some of the things I experienced, I knew it wasn't a fit, and I knew I didn't want to go do a startup for somebody else again.
Hmm.
Um, and I was very motivated to do something on my own and do what I love, but to do it in a way that I can feel really proud of. And that is focusing on quality and developing trust and meaningful relationships, and creating and fostering a culture that is one that acknowledges its team and has a lot of fun. And so I had a clear vision of what that would look like for me. And I knew at this time, I was 27. I knew I wanted to have a family one day. And I thought, I'm going to do it now. And so I decided to resign. I went and got a personal line of credit to upgrade my furniture. And I started the business. I
With
started the
personal
business
line of
on
credit.
$8,000 line of credit.
Oh my God. I love
So
it.
I had enough to keep me afloat for 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And
So you
so
had 6 weeks to make it work because then the money was gone and you just needed to get some traction in that time. So how did you make that happen in 6 weeks?
well, it was challenging because could you imagine being in recruiting before LinkedIn?
Yeah.
And I couldn't afford memberships for like Monster, or any of those job boards that were a really big thing back then. So it was all on relationships. I had enough money to put a couple ads out there, and from then I would interview and ask people, hey, if you refer somebody I place, I'm going to give you a referral bonus. And beyond that, just be very thankful. If you had a great experience with me, please share it. And so I built the business on referrals, and I really would do sales, from 8 in the morning till about three or 4 in the afternoon every day. And then I would do all of my interviewing in the evenings from like 4 to 9 p.m.
Wow.
And so I would just kept to it. I kept my head down and I really just focused on those two things. I
Mhm.
tried not to get distracted into busy work, make excuses for myself. It was 100% everything on the line, and I was accountable, and I was really motivated by it. I kind of loved having that responsibility and that pressure. And so yeah, so that's kind of how I got started.
That's a lot of hustle and grit.
Yeah.
I want you to share with the audience a little peek into what that looked like when you were selling from 8 to 4. And I asked that because a lot of people don't have firsthand experience with sales, let alone in an environment where you're brand new business as an entrepreneur, when you're brand new and you don't have reputation and logos and all of that going for you. There's no testimonials yet, there's no credibility in the market. That is a very challenging thing to take on. So give a little peek into those first few weeks when you were selling. How were you going about it? What was your routine?
Well, for me, it was focusing on the businesses that could use me without a lot of complexity. They could hire me, meaning there's not procurement involved. There's
Mm,
probably not going to be a big negotiation back and forth on my contract or somebody asking, well, give me references. How long have you been in business? So I focused on small to mid-sized businesses
mm,
that have a pain point that I can solve. And so what I would do is I would interview these great candidates in the evenings, and then I would get on the phone and I would position the candidate for the client. And, they would be available to start next week. This is what their work consists of. These are the awards they've won. And so that's how I started getting placements and getting billings. So I didn't go after the big kind of dreamy companies,
right.
because those big dreamy companies, it's a much longer process, a much thorough process, in which if you're just getting started, they probably will not want to work with you.
That's right.
Um,
And so you looked at it from a practical lens of I've got 6 weeks and
yeah,
only this much money that to give me that runway of success, and I need a short conversion cycle. And so how do I
exactly.
create value and prove myself?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think that, sales are so important. And, I've done a lot of speaking, a lot of mentoring. At any point in time, I'm mentoring between 10 and 15 women entrepreneurs. And I just do that as kind of a give back, and I get a ton of energy from it. But, it is kind of up to you. And selling is so important. And that's great. That's great if you've got a great CRM, but building relationships and selling is much different than sending emails and hoping that somebody's going to buy from you because you've sent an email.
Yeah.
And so that hustling and that building a relationship and taking the time to know who you're selling to and positioning your product or service, it's so important. It's so important when you're starting out and throughout your various um, cycles or areas of growth or
Yeah, there's
timing of
just
growth.
no shortcuts there. You just kind of have to really focus on who is your ideal customer and how do you solve their pain and position your offerings correctly. So that was your start, and obviously you got
Yes.
the success you wanted in 6 weeks and kept going
Mm.
from there. What was the next chapter?
Well, the next chapter was, it was interesting. Maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, I was moving and a piece of paper fell out of a box, and it was my projections when I started my business of how many employees I have and top line sales. And I even had like how much money I would be giving back to philanthropic organizations. And let's just say, I was quite optimistic. So for me, obviously, it took a little bit longer, as most things do in life, than we hope to, or we think that we can accomplish. But for me, is I know I didn't want it to be an individual company. I'm in the services business. You can't scale it if it's just you. It's
Mhm.
just impossible, like many companies in sectors. So I knew I wanted to hire. So for me, I paid myself incredibly conservatively. Like I think that my first year I paid myself $16,000, my next year 25.
Mhm.
It wasn't until my fourth year that I was actually paying myself even something close to what I was making previously before starting a business.
Mhm.
So for me, I wanted to reinvest in the business, reinvest in technology, hire the right people, and treat them well.
Mhm.
So, from day one, I offer 25 paid days off, no matter what your level is, summer hours, benefit package. I had a, employee handbook. I wanted to create a company that had the structures of a big company, but the flexibility and the fun of an entrepreneurial one, because I knew that was key in attracting the right people,
Mhm.
and keeping them, engaged, and retain
Mhm.
them so they can stay with your company and have that continuity with clients.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
that vision of what you wanted to create, it was also backed up with delayed gratification that you were okay with. And that's not something that a lot of people choose. We're living in an age where it's sort of everything's instant, wanting that,
Yeah.
yeah, I did this, I want instant results. And if I'm not getting it, I don't know if I should stick to it. Maybe there's something better. Why do you think that kind of tenacity is so important in getting the right kind of long-term results?
Well, it's absolutely necessary because something meaningful and long lasting just doesn't happen overnight. So, you're not being fair to yourself or to your business or to your future business or shareholders. If you think it's going to be a slam dunk based on a relationship you have or a brand you have or your first client, because things don't always happen as planned.
Mhm.
So you've got to be prepared for that long game. And in that game, you're going to get bumped around. You're going to be knocked out. You're going to second guess
Mhm.
if you have what it takes or if you want it. And so you have to really embrace the journey because it's not a destination. You've
Mhm.
got to keep going constantly, no matter how long you've been at it. You're always working on something. Um, but nothing in life offers that opportunity for such growth,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I
when
mean,
you're working in,
entrepreneurship really is a journey of
it's,
self-discovery.
it totally is.
The things
You
you
know,
learn about yourself, you would never know otherwise, what you're made of.
that's right. And it was my motivation for writing a book was to share the truth
Mm.
because sadly, or I mean, hey, it's amazing that a lot of these big tech companies are getting so much funding and they're scaling like crazy and their top line revenue and they're being featured in the media. And so, but the reality is big majority of small mid-sized business, we don't experience that. We're not in that game. And so we're constantly measuring ourselves against the ideal or the perceived ideal. And through public speaking and being honest about some of the challenges I've had to overcome and the choices I've made and why I made them, why what I would do differently now. Um, I wanted to share that because I do think that there's a lot of suffering, silent suffering.
Mhm.
And I think we can be incredibly hard on ourselves, but also to understand is what you see in the media isn't always true. Nobody's success is happening overnight. And sometimes you only see that high level kind of review, but you don't know all of the blood, sweat, and tears that actually truly went into it.
Yeah.
So it's important to realize that nothing worth much is instant.
Absolutely. It's that overnight success. People don't know that the night is 10 years long. The thing
Right.
that you see at the end
Right.
is just the final bow on the story that only you've been through. And I think there is indeed a disservice that sometimes is done to aspiring entrepreneurs or the dreamers that want to build a business that think it's as quick as like an idea and then someone invests $100 million in you and next thing you're a
Right.
billion-dollar unicorn and
Right.
everything's hunky-dory and then you get bought out by Google, right?
Right.
But that's such a small fraction of the entrepreneurs and the startups that have that story. Majority are hustling and being tenacious through every step of the process, much like your story. What was one of the hardest things that or challenges that you had to face and overcome that perhaps you share in the book that you might be able to share with us?
Yeah. I would say the toughest was lacking self awareness
Mm.
about how I was showing up as a leader. And um,
So what's
for
an
me,
example, like a specific example around that?
yeah, well, you know what? I started a company because I was really great at something, and I talked a little bit about my vision and my motivation to doing that. But
Mhm.
really, I was only really great at recruiting and building relationships with clients. All of a sudden, I had that, and then I had payroll, and then I had forecasting, and then I did hiring, and then I'm a manager, then I'm a leader. And all of a sudden, I didn't really want to go to work anymore.
Mm.
And I had to do some thinking about why am I making an excuse not to go to work? What happened? And the reality is my company kind of became something I didn't really want
Mm.
because I wasn't showing up. I wasn't leading by example. I
Mm.
wasn't really being honest. And I felt as though the company had outgrown my capabilities,
Mhm.
and I felt really insecure and inadequate. And so one of the hardest lessons was, but the best lesson was understanding all of my shortcomings and why they were showing up the way they were. Because it has a lot to do with, childhood. It has a lot to do, there's so many different factors when you really dig deep into your leadership style of what shows up.
Mhm.
And for me, I thought that I was really well liked and that people respected me a ton. Well, here's the thing: when you're an entrepreneur, nobody's actually giving you feedback. You're probably not asking for it unless it's great, you know, unless they have something to say about how incredible your ideas are, or, how proud they are to work with the company. That you could hear all day long. But really, do you have a culture in which people have a safe place to tell you areas that you can work on? So
Mhm.
then we walk around with this perception of ourselves that's actually not true,
Yeah.
and we're lacking self-awareness. And so for me, I went and I went to a leadership school in North Carolina, in Chapel Hill. And Dr. Bell, who
Dr. Ella
started it.
Bell.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I went to Dr. Bell. And before going, I think I had to give like 15, 20 names: ex-employees, partner, friends, current employees, direct, indirect reports. And it was a couple of months before I went to take this program. So, life happened in between. I totally forgot that I supplied those email addresses. And I was going to this program because I thought, I can always be a better leader. I mean, I'm pretty good, but I guess I could get better at it. That's really how I felt. So I remember on day two, and I was with all these mostly males. I think there was two women, about 22 guys, and most of them were big, CEOs. And on day two, energy changed, and they started handing out these binders, and they said, behind tab 5, uh, you know, um, you know, are all the positive things that people had to say about you, and behind tab 6 are the negative things. So we recommend reading 5, and then tab 6, and then back to 5 again, and take it and be grateful for the feedback. And so everyone starts, like, having a look, right? Because we're like that. We want to know, what do people have to say? How great are we? And they said, before you touch your binder, we're going to actually break for the day. You're in beautiful Chapel Hill, right? Blue sky. Go find a park bench, read, reread, think, reflect. But a few of us were kind of sneaking, and I saw like control freak, insecure, passive aggressive, trust issues,
Wow.
dictator, right? I mean, hey, there were a lot of lovely things too,
Yeah.
but those words were strong, and I was crushed. My first reaction is, I got somebody else's binder until I saw my name in there, and I'm like, okay, oh, maybe this is real. And I did that. I went for a big walk. I felt sorry for myself for about 10 minutes, and then for 2 minutes I was mad, like they have no idea what I've done for them, right?
Yeah.
And then I was just overwhelmed. I was actually overwhelmed, and I was feeling completely overcome by gratitude, you know? And I actually went back to the office the next day. On my flight back, I built a deck, and I presented it, and it was all of the feedback and how grateful I was. And it will never come back to them. I have no interest in finding out who said what. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to share with you what I'm talking about. And I'm going to share with you from this point forward the type of leader I want to be. And at any point, you can hold me accountable to my behavior if I slip up. And that was the hardest thing that I've gone through probably as an entrepreneur and person. And it's the one that I'm the most grateful for, because that is growth. Then that is growth that, carries on in your relationships. If you sit on boards, all aspects of your life. And so, but it was a tricky one. It's easy to take a course. It's tough to get that kind of feedback and work on yourself and change some of your thinking and behaviors.
That is such a powerful story. And thank you for your candor and willingness to share that so openly, because as you said, for any leader, entrepreneurs especially, leaders in corporations often have mechanisms where there's a feedback loop. But as entrepreneurs, you become lone wolves. And often, if you're successful, you almost have that positive feedback of, I must be a superstar because I'm doing things that only 5% of humanity does, right?
Right.
And it can be a slippery slope to kind of buy into your own bullshit, if you will.
Yeah.
And it takes some real talk to not only be willing to seek it out, but to embrace it and then act on it. So kudos to you for how you showed up and how you responded to that. And I'm sure that set even more of a cultural impact for your organization by your reaction to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to, fast forward from there to where your career is today and the kind of leader you are today and what inspires you. So give us a picture of where things are now.
Yeah. So, where I'm at today, I've got a lot of experience. So, I'm in a pretty good place. I would say our culture is near perfect. I would say near perfect. In fact, we just ran an engagement survey, which we don't do regularly. I just wanted to see how everyone was feeling. We've almost been working from home exclusively for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to see how everyone was feeling and how, are they working too hard? Are they feeling engaged? And I think our average was about 9.2 out of 10 in terms of engagement. And that's something I'm incredibly proud of. And it's something that it's always on my mind. It's not something that you can go, okay, culture's good, moving on to, strategy. It's something that you always have to put some energy and thought into because, your business changes, the needs of your team change, and team dynamics are also, it can be tricky. So I love the company. I'm incredibly proud of what we've been able to accomplish. We've been behind 14,000 placements. We've done a lot philanthropically with local organizations to help disadvantaged youth. And we have a ton of fun together. And so remember, I really do think you don't ever get into business to kind of break even and work harder than you've ever worked and not have fun.
Yeah.
And I would say within creative niche, I love the diversity and I love the individuals that work there. And so we really work hard and play hard together. And we were scheduled to actually go on a trip this summer, which we've had to delay. But last year we were all in Dominican Republic for 5 days together, and celebrating and enjoying our success and our hard work. So that's kind of where the business is today. We're going to be having our perhaps our strongest year in business this year. So that's incredibly rewarding to me. It is for sure. I'm also, writing quite a bit. So I do write for Inc. And I love sharing thoughts and tips and tricks and like quick hits of advice. I do enjoy that. I do a fair amount of speaking, which I really get a lot of energy from. I never went to a conference and saw, my first conference when a keynote speaker came out. I never was one of those people that thought, I want to do that. In fact, I hate being the center of attention. Um, but I kind of fell into speaking by just volunteering. There was a cancellation, so I sat on a panel, and from that I got a keynote, and just kind of took off that way.
Mhm.
So I enjoy speaking because I do feel oftentimes we're just talking about all the good stuff, and we're not talking about things that are relatable
Mhm.
or that can be actioned in business, to help entrepreneurs get unstuck or maybe look at a problem a different way. Um, so I enjoy the public speaking, and I'm an investor. So I'm an investor in two tech companies, and I love working with CEOs and entrepreneurs, and mentoring them. And I'm pretty active with philanthropic organizations. I sit on a board, and I get a ton of energy from that as well. So it's a full life, and it's a busy life, but I love it. I
And
absolutely love it.
it's quite a journey, as well as being a highly awarded entrepreneur and a family with 4 kids. So it's quite a journey from where you started with a 6-week runway and $8,000 to make it all work and no safety net. So your story really illustrates that you just got to go with it and not overthink and not hesitate and just keep solving problems and growing throughout that journey. That it's the journey that you're choosing, not the destination you're chasing.
Right.
um, so I want to get some specific actionable advice that you can share with our audience, which is a lot of women aspiring for leadership and rising up in their careers, whether it's from your book or your own life experience. What are the top 3 pieces of advice you would give to someone who's ambitious, who has big dreams, and is really trying to navigate a very fast changing, competitive, and risky environment?
Yeah, that's a big question. I I did a talk at Silicon Valley women's event. It's for women in tech a couple of years ago, and my presentation was a lot about kind of building your brand. And it was interesting because although the headline was about building your brand, and somebody could have thought, oh, that means my social presence, and
Mhm.
but it was kind of like it's building your brand in your space, so you are the one that is thought of for speaking engagements, for mentorship. You are thought of um, for somebody to put forward for promotion, and considered. And we talked a lot about reputation, and like how do you build your relationship, your reputation, especially in a very male dominated space such as tech. And I define reputation as I think that I heard this from somebody, and I would give them props for it, but can't remember right now. Is if people who know you were out having a drink and your name came up, what would they say about you?
Mm.
And I think it's important to always be mindful of your brand within your space, and also be um, not always waiting for an opportunity to come to you, and also though not asking if you haven't earned it yet, but being indispensable and creating a space for yourself. Continuing to learn and take programs. If you want to become a leader, well, there's a lot of great things that you can do right now. You don't have to wait until you have a specific title.
Mhm.
So I think that kind of individual, like, brand building is fantastic. And I also think mentoring women is a great way as well to build on your network, and look for mentorship. And I do think that there are some great mentorship programs out there, but I think sometimes when you ask people, will you be my mentor? Some people ask me that, and I feel like, oh my God, it feels like a proposal and a huge commitment, right? For a 6-month mentorship program or something. But I think just having specific asks from people in
Mhm.
your space that are senior, where you have something interesting and it's a challenge or something that you want to learn. So it's a lot more, I think, impactful, and you're building your brand a lot more if it's, hey, I'm going through something right now. It's I know you've probably went through it a few years ago. And I would love to have a conversation with you about that.
Mhm.
um, they're going to get to know you. And then the next time somebody's looking for a recommendation, they're going to be, wow, I met with a firecracker who, came forward. She found me. And you know what? She is so impressive. I would recommend her to anyone. So it's figuring that, because that's the stuff that really matters. It's
Mhm.
not really how you are, like your social brand. It's the stuff, it's the meat kind of behind, it's
Yeah.
important stuff behind it. So having a game plan, get a game plan for that. Another one I recommend is just having a timeline, because especially in fast forward places, we talked about how entrepreneurs are measured. It's top line growth, number of employees, number of locations. In tech, you're just always so competitive, and you're actually accomplishing a ton of things, and you probably never feel like it's enough. And
Mm.
so creating a timeline with specific accomplishments. What were you tasked with? What was your involvement? What was the result? What were the learnings from that? Once you have that, and it doesn't matter if you have it in a journal, if you have it in a spreadsheet, but creating that timeline with your accomplishments, I think, is always something critical to have, because sometimes, when you're positioned for an opportunity, you forget how great you are.
It's
And
like
I would
having your own greatest hits list. Like you've got that, and
exactly.
you give yourself props, but it also helps you pace yourself where you're
Yes.
not comparing your version 1 to someone else's version 12.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so having that, so that's just top of mind for you to position yourself for those opportunities. I would say that, those two things are pretty important. And, not everybody wants to do public speaking. I mentioned that I kind of fell into it, but if you're a subject matter expert and you like to give back, speaking can be a great way to accomplish that.
Mhm.
And you don't need to have like a shtick or be you can just be yourself, and that's enough. It's just about being prepared, knowing how you're going to position your presentation and
Mhm.
your insights. But could be just a great way for you to get kind of additional exposure, especially now that we're kind of
Mhm.
working remote. It's a great way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to sum it up, basically, invest in lasting relationships that will help you grow and get access. Take advantage of resources that are available to grow your brand and show your expertise, and finally, develop your reputation, because your reputation is what people know you of when you're not there, and that's what opened doors. That's
Yes.
great advice, Mandy. Thank you for sharing that. I want you to tell our guests where they can find your book and read more of the lessons that will inspire them to do much of what you've done.
Sure. We can find the book on Amazon. And if you wanted to reach out to me, you can get in contact with me through my website. So it's mandy-gilbert.com. And I'd love to hear from you. And thank you so
Awesome.
much, Nikki, for having me.
Wonderful. And we'll be sharing all of these resources on your podcast episode as well. Thank you for joining us today. It was great to have you.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you.